Okay, it's Monday, January 26th, live from the frozen tundra of Louisville, Kentucky. Much of the nation sits under a blanket of snow and ice, and the entire country watches events in Minneapolis, Minnesota, as they cast a chaotic pall on our national mood. The last hostage has returned from Gaza. Illegal immigrant crime has claimed more lives in North Carolina and Washington, D.C., and Congressman Jeff Crank of Colorado joins us at 33 minutes past the hour. This is the Scott Jennings Show on Salem Radio. Common sense for the American people. Let us begin today in Minnesota, where a series of events that began late last week set in motion another round of violent protests that has left the 46th largest city in America in utter chaos. First, the story that started this latest round of chaos, the 5-year-old boy that was supposedly used as bait. You no doubt heard this yarn. Well, it wasn't true. Federal law enforcement officers were conducting a targeted investigation of an illegal alien from Ecuador. The man abandoned his child outdoors. In the process, ICE agents took custody of the little boy, sheltered him, gave him food, played his favorite songs. Federal agents took care of a little boy after he was abandoned by his father and after his mother refused to open the door and let this poor child back inside. But what story did you hear? That federal agents used the boy as bait? That the little boy was arrested? None of that was true. But the narrative took hold late last week nonetheless. Democrats, media, once again, their collusion drove the narrative in order to whip up more political vigilantism. And that's what we got this weekend in Minneapolis. More protests, more violence, more mayhem. And in those protests, another man lost his life. Alex Preddy, 37 years old, inserted himself into a law enforcement situation on Saturday morning. And in the chaos that followed, he was shot by a federal agent, and he died. This is the second person to die in Minnesota after inserting themselves into a law enforcement situation, something you should not do, something that is a federal crime. Protesting is one thing. Inserting yourself into active law enforcement settings is quite another. It is quite dangerous. You should not do it, no matter what your elected officials have told you to do. The insurgency in Minnesota, make no mistake, is well organized, it is well funded, it is well trained. These are not random passersby. These are highly organized agitators and disruptors who are trying to spark violence and mayhem on the streets of Minneapolis. Now, following the shooting, the narrative war from the left kicked into overdrive, and in one of the most idiotic, historically illiterate, and irresponsible statements made to date, the governor of Minnesota, an absolute buffoon, Tim Walz, said this, cut number 5.
Many of us grew up reading that story of Anne Frank. Somebody's going to write that children's story about Minnesota.
Can we just take a moment to recognize how outrageously disgusting it is to say such a thing, to invoke the name of Anne Frank, who alongside 1 million other children were mass slaughtered by the most evil regime in human history, and saying that our government is in some way comparable to the Nazi regime? Can you imagine what other historically illiterate garbage this man Walz taught school children? Don't forget, he was a teacher who used to brag that none of his students could get into Ivy League schools. Now we know why. So Walz whipped up more Walz's warriors to again take to the streets of Minneapolis. And while you slept last night, violent rioters attacked a hotel in Minneapolis where they believe that federal agents were sleeping. The hotel was badly damaged. You've seen video, of course, of people climbing up ladders on each other's shoulders with hammers and shovels and tools, smashing the signage, smashing in the front door. There's video of one lone armed federal agent guarding the front door. Why is he by himself? Because the Minneapolis Police Department has been ordered not to assist federal law enforcement if they are under attack. This hotel is badly damaged. Every car in the parking lot absolutely wrecked with vandalism or worse. And in the middle of all this violence, all of this rioting, all of this disorder, what did Tim Walz have to say last night, literally as it was going on? He said, and I quote, "I am damn proud of Minnesota. As I have reported to you since the beginning of this chaos," Tim Walz, honorary Somali pirate Jacob Fry, who's the mayor, Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, Tina Smith and Amy Klobuchar, the senators, Ilhan Omar, Congresswoman, all of these Democrats, they want this. They want chaos. They want destruction. Flanagan at one point told the rioters to, quote, "put their bodies on the line." Walz himself compared all of this to the Battle of Gettysburg. They do not care how many people they radicalize with their rhetoric. They do not care how many people wind up inserting themselves into the middle of chaotic law enforcement situations and wind up dead or badly injured. Because chaos is good for them. This all started when the news broke of a massive fraud investigation touching most of the Democrats that I mentioned above. That's when this all started. Coincidence? Come on. This is an IQ test. Don't fail it. So what now? Well, President Trump has some decisions to make. He started last night by dispatching White House border czar Tom Homan to take control of the federal response in Minneapolis. And today, Trump says he has spoken to Walz. Here's the president's statement. "Tim Walz called me with a request to work together with respect to Minnesota. It was a very good call, and we actually seem to be on a similar wavelength. I told Governor Walz I would have Tom Homan call him, and that what we are looking for here are any and all criminals that they have in their possession." The governor very respectfully understood that, and I will be speaking to him in the near future. He was happy that Tom Homan was going to Minnesota. We've had tremendous success in Washington and other cities. Even in Minnesota, crime is down, but both Governor Walz and I want to make it better. That's what Donald Trump says. A rather conciliatory note from Trump. Will the Democrats in Minnesota do the same? Well, here is the mayor of Minnesota, honorary Somali pirate Jacob Fry, Minneapolis, the mayor of Minneapolis. He makes clear that he cares more about illegal immigrants and protecting them than he does American citizens. Cut 6.
In Minneapolis, we will not cooperate with ICE or any federal agency around immigration enforcement work. We will not.
Have you stopped to ask yourself why there is chaos in Minneapolis and literally nowhere else in America? What does Minneapolis have that nobody else has? Well, it has Walz and Fry and these insane Democrats who believe their jurisdiction should exist in a state of secession from the federal government and from federal laws. That is the bottom line here. They believe federal immigration laws should not apply to Minnesota. Does that sound reasonable to you? Does that sound like something that should be allowed? Of course, it sounds insane. Who are federal agents picking up? Drug traffickers, rapists, sex criminals, smugglers, murderers, terrorists in some cases. Some of the world's worst. Joe Biden and his party let millions of them walk right into our country, and now Democrats in Minnesota are trying to keep them here. Donald Trump was elected on a pledge to deport them, and that is all that he is trying to do. I hope this conversation with Walz and Trump bears fruit. I hope the Democrats in Minnesota come to their senses. They have an awful lot of political capital invested in this left-wing insurgency right now. It's hard to put Antifa back in the bottle once you have invited them and their tactics into your community. Common sense for the American people. Scott Jennings broadcasting live today from Louisville, Kentucky. We are buried on the snow and ice here in Louisville, like many of you are across America. It will not deter us from bringing you the truth or the common sense that you need. I want to continue today by discussing the crisis of illegal immigration in this country. While most of our attention remains on Minneapolis, where local Democrats are refusing to cooperate with federal law enforcement, there are other terrible, terrible stories of illegal aliens committing heinous crimes elsewhere. Let's go to North Carolina, where Fletcher Harris, age 20, and Skylar Provenza, age 19, were killed by an illegal alien named Juan Alvarado Aguilar. Let's hear cut 12.
Yesterday, Aguilar appeared in Rowan County Court with the help of a Spanish translator, facing 2 counts of felony death by vehicle and a DWI charge. Prosecutors say he crossed the center line on Amity Hill Road last Friday, crashing into an oncoming car and killing 20-year-old Fletcher Harris and 19-year-old Skylar Provenza. Troopers say they smelled a strong odor of alcohol on Aguilar's breath at the scene.
Aguilar killed 2 young people just at the beginning of their lives in a drunk driving accidents. Prosecutors revealed Aguilar has 2 prior failures to appear in court and a prior DWI charge on his record. This is an illegal alien somehow still in our country. In the Washington, D.C. area this week, the body of a 14-year-old was found murdered by 3 MS-13 gang members. Let's get the details of this from ABC 7 News. Cut 1.
18-year-old Jose Merlos Majano, 21-year-old Alan Jose Garcia Padilla, and 19-year-old William Quiera Gutierrez. All 3 are from D.C. A 4th suspect is a 17-year-old from Hyattsville. In November, the FBI, MPD, and PG County Police were looking for Amaya Ayala in this park. Instead, they found his body. The medical examiner ruled his death a homicide and found multiple injuries on the 14-year-old's body. Investigators say Amaya Ayala knew at least one of the 4 suspects and said that the murder appears to be gang-related. 7 News confirmed with a source that it's connected to the MS-13 gang.
All of these kids, MS-13 gang members, all of them illegal aliens, were previously arrested by the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C., but were released back into the community. Why wasn't ICE notified that these violent illegal aliens, gang members, were released back onto the street? Now a 14-year-old boy from Maryland is dead because of it. Who runs D.C.? Democrats, who are releasing violent illegals back into the community instead of turning them over to federal law enforcement. They had been picked up before. Listen to this. Possession of a large capacity ammunition feeding device. Possession of unregistered firearm. Carrying a pistol without a license, carrying a pistol without a license in a gun-free zone, possession of unregistered ammunition, defacing public property, possession of a prohibited weapon, unlawful possession of ammunition, possession of fraudulent documents, including a lawful permanent resident card and Social Security card. Keep that in mind when they tell you that illegal aliens can't get ID cards. Of course they can. They get them all the time. These are just some of the charges these MS-13 gang members had faced, and yet they stayed in our country, and they were released back onto the streets, and now a 14-year-old boy is dead. One of the suspects here, by the way, was literally spray painting MS-13 gang symbols on houses. Nobody in Washington thought this was a red flag? Do not be taken in by the propaganda, folks. Illegal aliens are in our country. They are committing violence against American citizens every day. Local Democrats in a number of jurisdictions like Minneapolis, like Washington, North Carolina, all over the country, they're happy to turn them loose on you, against you. Why? Well, because they hate Trump. Isn't that enough? I hope it makes them feel better as they watch the news and they see their constituents being murdered and terrorized by these illegal aliens who are on the streets of America. When we come back, Congressman Jeff Crank from Colorado joins us to discuss all of today's news and more. You are listening to Common Sense for the American People. This is Scott Jennings here on the Salem Network. American people. Scott Jennings is with you on Salem. Coming up in just a moment, Congressman Jeff Crank from Colorado is on the line. However, I must deliver a quick message from our friends and partners at Child Help. I want to tell you a story that Child Help sees far too often. It starts as a game, a kid logging on after school, talking with friends, having fun. Then someone else joins the conversation. At first, nothing feels wrong. They get some compliments. They ask a few curious questions. Hey, someone's paying attention to me, the child thinks. But over time, it becomes personal, then private, then secret, and eventually uncomfortable. This is how online grooming works, not with force, but with trust. By the time a child realizes something is wrong, they are scared. They are scared to tell their parents. They don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to lose their devices or their friends. This is where Child Help steps in. Child Help teaches kids how to recognize grooming behavior before it turns into abuse. It helps parents spot the warning signs early. They remind kids that secrets about bodies are not okay, and they help families act when something doesn't feel right. This is not about fear. This is about preparation. For just $27, you can help protect a child from abuse. Text Child Help, all one word, Child Help, to 94878 or donate at childhelp.org/Scott. Child Help, of course, also operates the National Child Abuse Hotline, which takes thousands of calls every year. If you'd like to keep kids safe, support Child Help. I do it. I am a donor. Would not ask you to do something that I don't do myself. I encourage you to support Child Help today. Scott Jennings on Salem. On the line with us now, Congressman Jeff Crank, representing Colorado's 5th District. He serves on the Armed Services and Natural Resources Committees. Congressman Crank, welcome into the Scott Jennings Show, live from Colorado Springs.
Scott, thanks for having me. Excited to be with you.
Glad you're here today. I first just want to get your reaction to the news of the weekend. You, I'm sure, are taking in the video of the chaos in Minneapolis. You've heard the details of the shooting on Saturday morning. What's going through your mind right now as someone who has to make laws in Washington, D.C.?
Well, very unfortunate, very sad, of course, that happened, and of course, entirely preventable. And that's where we have to start with this. Of course, if you don't interfere with law enforcement, executing a warrant or doing their work, if you don't interfere with that, you're probably going to be fine. Now, we do need a full and complete investigation of this. I want to make sure that every American citizen gets treated appropriately, but nobody should draw conclusions based off, shaky video. We need all the answers. I understand. I hear recently that there was body cam video on some of those agents, and so very anxious to see that. But none of us should draw any conclusions until we see all of that about whether the action was appropriate or not.
Congressman, I want to play some audio for you. Democrats are now threatening, or I think some of them are promising, to shut down the government over DHS funding. Guys, let's cue up Cut 11 and play this, and we'll get Congressman Crank's reaction.
First of all, of course, I'm against this spending bill.
It's our view that you should not proceed with the funding for DHS until you have in my view, radical changes, rein in ICE.
I hate shutdowns. I'm one of the people that helped negotiate the solution to the end of the last shutdown, but I can't vote for a bill that includes ICE funding under these circumstances.
And Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said on Sunday that Senate Democrats will not allow that DHS bill to move forward. He wants it stripped away from the other 5 bills, saying in part, quote, Senate Republicans must work with Democrats to advance the other 5 funding bills while we work to rewrite the DHS bill. This is the best course of action, and the American people are on our side.
Congressman, when you hear this rhetoric about ICE and DHS funding from Democrats, what do you think? Are we headed for a government shutdown?
Well, I mean, obviously it would just be a partial shutdown. It would probably end up just shutting down the Department of Homeland Security. It doesn't sound like a very good idea to do that at a time when we need, obviously, Homeland Security, and we need our ICE agents who are just doing their job. I mean, for goodness sakes, could you imagine being out on the front lines, being an ICE agent, literally under the gun day in and day out, people throwing frozen water bottles at you and trying to entice you into a fight. And then the Democrats in Congress are going to take away your paycheck as well. This is a terrible idea. I hope that they'll come to their senses and work with us. Look, we should review all that's being done right now with ICE and make sure that everything is appropriate. The president called for that this morning, that we make sure that we're doing everything right. There should be a full accounting of this shooting and making sure that our officers acted appropriately. But we shouldn't hold the good men and women who work for us every single day to keep us safe, shouldn't hold them hostage. And I just really hope that the Democrats will come to their senses on this.
Yeah, Congressman, my understanding is that ICE and border enforcement, immigration enforcement has all the money it needs, that by shutting down DHS funding, what you're really doing here is shutting down funding for FEMA and TSA and other things that are under DHS, but that ICE itself and immigration enforcement is already funded. And at a time when most of the country sits under a blanket of snow and ice, it seems to me Democrats threatening to shut down FEMA funding is a terrible idea.
Yeah, it is a terrible idea, but we've seen them do it before, right? They did it supposedly over health care, even though it wasn't really over health care. It's just a bad idea. We thought we had this worked out, and we did have it worked out. We had an agreement to get all this stuff funded, to not be on a continuing resolution for the first time in many, many years. And then, of course, they go back on their word and back on the deal once this terrible tragedy happened in Minneapolis. So I hope that we can find a way to get past this. It wouldn't be a good thing for America.
Congressman Jeff Crank is our guest. He's speaking to us live from Colorado Springs, Colorado today. Congressman, I want to talk to you about Budget Reconciliation 2.0. We have been enthusiastic supporters of this here, and I know you are as well. And we've had various members of the House Republican Conference on to tout this. Now, you sit on the Energy and Mineral Resource Subcommittee of the Natural Resources Committee, and I know there's going to be some energy provisions in this next round of budget reconciliation. Can you tell us about that? What do you want to see in this bill as it progresses through the House?
Well, we certainly, in the first reconciliation bill, we did a lot to get government out of the way of energy production and trying to get us away from picking winners and losers in energy. A lot of that came through our committee on the Natural Resources Committee. I think that if we can get that through, and again, with reconciliation, the secret to that is we don't need 60 votes. We don't need the Democrats. If they choose not to work with us, if they choose to be obstructionists, as they have done many times, that's the way around the 60 vote threshold that's needed in the Senate. So I would hope that we would work hard to get a Reconciliation 2.0 on as many topics as we can through. We've got a lot of work to do. There was a lot of damage done from the Biden administration to our economy, to our energy sector, and many of the things that we've done will help, but there's much more that we can do, and I hope we do it in Reconciliation 2.0.
Now, in Colorado, I know you're dealing with something that people just call the Colorado River water crisis. And I'd like to hear a little more about that. And is there anything in this legislation that needs to be done to help people in your district and around Colorado due to this situation with the Colorado River?
Well, certainly, water in the West, is, as you know, Scott, is something that we fight over, and we fight over it a lot. And Colorado is unique because we are the only state in America that we don't have any rivers that run into Colorado. Every river in Colorado runs out of Colorado because we're kind of the starting point for most of that because of our elevation. So we don't have water that's coming from other states into Colorado. So for us, it's critical that we have enough water, and frankly, that we be able to build more storage. We've been, and this gets back to some of the environmental issues. They have literally, the environmental crazy groups out there have been able to shut down water storage projects all across the United States and certainly in Colorado. So we have plenty of water, we just can't store it for when we need it. And that's something that we should do, not only in Colorado, but across the West, across the United States. Particularly in the West, we just don't have the water that many other states have in the East. And it's just critical that we're able to do that. And so from the Colorado River's perspective, we're taking a lot of water out of that. Both other states are taking it out. California taking, frankly, much more than their fair share out of it. But again, the best way to address this is to get more storage, not only for Colorado, but for other states, so that we don't just have water fall and then continue to run down and we can't use that water.
Congressman, you sit on the Armed Services Committee. Interested in your reaction of the news that the USS Abraham Lincoln is moving into position in the Indian Ocean. Other military assets appear to be moving towards the Middle East. Any comment on what you're seeing? And do you support the idea of the president striking the Iranian regime in order to help the protesters there? Estimates today are that tens of thousands of people have been slaughtered over the last few days.
Yeah, what a terrible tragedy. That regime in Iran is brutal. They should be gone, and that should be America's goal, is to get rid of them. And I think back to 2009 when we had a very similar situation. We had a student uprising in Iran. President Obama at the time didn't send help. I think the Iranian students particularly were waiting for America to help, and we lost that opportunity. And I don't think we can lose that opportunity again here. I hope the president acts in a very decisive way to help the people who want freedom and liberty, not just for Iran, but let's think about what that would do for the entire Middle East, because right now, many of the more moderate Arab states are willing to work with Israel, and we see some of those around the Middle East that are willing to at least work with, find a way to coexist with Israel. The real problem is Iran, this Iranian regime, which refuses to work with that. And many of these Arab states, they want to see this Iranian regime gone because they are so destabilizing to the Middle East right now. So I do hope that the president does what is necessary. And there's lots of ways, lots of things at his disposal, right, whether it's cyber attacks or, striking from a military standpoint or sanctions. There's lots of ways that he can do this. And I know he's considering all of those.
Congressman Jeff Crank, thanks for joining us. He is the representative for Colorado's 5th District. He joined us live today from Colorado Springs. Congressman, we'll have you back soon. It is Monday, January 26th. Scott Jennings, Common Sense for the American People, broadcasting to you today from the frozen tundra of Louisville, Kentucky. I know many of you out there under snow and ice. Hope you're staying warm and staying safe. Some of the roads I traveled on to get here today were okay. Some were not. So please, don't do anything stupid. That's a good rule for life. Should I do this? Is this stupid? Don't do anything stupid. Stay safe for your families, for my sake, please. Don't do anything dumb out there. I want to round out the first hour here with international politics. We have excellent news today. The Israeli Defense Force, the IDF, has found the last remaining hostage in Gaza. You all have been hearing about this. There was one last hostage, the remains of one last hostage, and it's been sitting. And this has been part of the deal to get to the second phase of the president's peace plan. They had to return. Hamas had to return the remains of all hostages. Well, it's happened. Ron Gavili, who served in the Israeli Peace Special Forces, he fell in combat on October the 7th. His body was the last to come home. 843 days have passed since October the 7th, and all the hostages are home. I think this is the first time since 2014 there are not any Israeli hostages being held by Hamas. We can celebrate this milestone. I'm sure Mr. Gavili's family is happy to have his remains back in Israel. And for those of us who want to see peace in the Middle East and a progression of this peace process, this was a vital issue. This was a vital issue for Israel and for everybody who is engaged in trying to make peace. Keeping it in the Middle East, we are waiting to see if there's going to be any continued action against the Ayatollah's regime in Iran. I just asked Congressman Jeff Crank of Colorado about this. There are reports saying that the death toll from the protest crackdowns have reached perhaps 30,000. 30,000. Now, many people are debating right now, including the president, about whether we should strike and whether we should take out the Ayatollah's regime. They're obviously weaker than they have been. The core strategic question for the president is, if I strike this regime, will it fall? Will it fall? And we have military assets moving into the region. There are reports about the USS Abraham Lincoln getting closer. So we'll see what the president wants to do this week. But again, the reports are perhaps 30,000 people dead at the hands of the Iranian regime. Let's take a look at this. This is cut number 8. These are college kids protesting on a college campus for something good. Let's look at this, cut 8.
Down with Khomeini! 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 Down with Khomeini!
Finally. Good for these kids. I'm glad to see somebody out there on a college campus protesting against a murderous regime, unlike you'd see at the kids at Columbia and other places. In other parts of the world, this was a massive story. I think it's getting lost in all the rest of the news. China's top general, second only to Xi Jinping, the nation's leader in the military command, has been put under investigation and accused of grave violations of discipline and the law. According to China's Ministry of National Defense, this is the most stunning escalation yet in Xi's purge of the People's Liberation Army elite. I'm reading to you from the New York Times and its reporter, Chris Buckley, who had the story. The general in question here, Zhang Yuxia, is vice chairman of the Central Military Commission, the Communist Party body that controls China's armed forces. Another member of the commission, General Liu Jinli, who leads the military's Joint Staff Department, is also under investigation, the Defense Ministry said. So General Zhang's downfall, according to this reporting, is the most drastic step so far in Xi's years-long campaign to root out what he says is corruption and disloyalty in the military. The reporting is that everybody is astonished by this because General Zhang seemed to be very close with, maybe a confidant of, Xi Jinping. It's Monday, January 22nd. Scott Jennings here on Salem. Common sense for the American people, broadcasting to you live today from Louisville, a cold, icy, and snowy Louisville. Cold, of course, is keeping us all warm this weekend. Donald Trump, our president, spoke to the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz. Caroline Leavitt is having a briefing in the White House this afternoon. We'll bring all of this to you during this hour of the Scott Jennings Show. We're going to start, however, with a guest. Lila Rose is with us today. She is a pro-life advocate. She is founder and president of Live Action. She is host of the Lila Rose Show podcast. She's also an author, and she is here to discuss her work in the pro-life movement and for the March for Life. Lila Rose, inaugural trip. Welcome into the Scott Jennings Show.
Thanks so much for having me on, Scott.
I follow you. I've been following you for a very long time. You can find Lila on the X platform at Lila Grace Rose. Let's start, Lila. On Friday, the March for Life took place in Washington. Over 100,000 pro-life advocates gathered in the nation's capital to fight for the sanctity of human life. You were there. Tell us about this year's march.
It was bigger than last year's. It was amazing. There were, as usual, thousands of young people, families marching the streets. The lack of media coverage is always really laughable, I would say, because this is the largest ongoing human rights demonstration in American history. And they are estimating 100,000 people out in the cold of Washington, D.C. It was an amazing event. It's inspiring. There is so much joy there. And what are we marching for? We're marching for the rights of every child to be born, and that marching for the dignity of every human person. And we're doing it at a time when there are 1 million abortions every single year. This is the leading cause of death in the world is abortion. In the United States, it's the #1 killer of children. And it was exciting and inspiring to see so many people standing up for their lives in the cold of D.C.
Lila, you started your organization, Live Action, when you were just 15 years old. This was back in 2003. We're over 20 years since that moment. How do you feel about the current state of the pro-life movement right now?
I feel a lot of optimism, but also determination, because we have seen some historic wins in recent years for our movement. We saw the one-year defund of Planned Parenthood at the federal level of hundreds of millions of dollars last year. That had not ever happened before in decades. This has been something the movement and I have been working for the last 2 decades. People told me it would be impossible to extricate the big abortion industry's funding, Planned Parenthood's funding, from the federal government, but that has been done for 1 year. So that's a huge win. It sets the precedent for us making that permanent. Last year, the pro-life prisoners that have been put in prison who were peaceful protesters under the Biden administration were given presidential pardon by President Trump. Those are good things. That being said, we have to be sober-minded and real about where we're at as a movement. The fact is this: we are seeing abortion numbers increase. The lives of children that are taken from abortion has increased. This past year, it was over 1 million lives taken by abortion. The majority of those abortions, Scott, are by the abortion pill. This is chemical abortions that is sent via our postal mail system, and that's 600,000 plus abortions every single year. Here's the truth. Our FDA, our HHS right now allows the abortion pill to be sent via the mail. This was instituted by Biden, before that Obama, before that Clinton. This has been a very pro-abortion ideology and recklessness in our healthcare system. And the reason we have so many abortions is because you can literally press a button and they show up on your doorstep. It's like DoorDash, basically. And these are pills that kill babies, so they should not be in the market. And they land 1 out of every 22 women who take them in the emergency room. And 1 out of every 10 women who take the abortion pill will end up with serious adverse side effects. So the fact that these are on the market under the Trump administration is a travesty. They need to be removed. So while we're optimistic and we are excited about the momentum, this is the necessary next step that needs to happen. It's time to pull the abortion pill from the market.
Let's talk a little more about this. I was in Arkansas last week. In fact, I was the keynote speaker at the Arkansas Right to Life annual dinner. I was there along with Sam Brownback from Kansas, who also gave great remarks. But there was a lot of conversation about this abortion pill issue because in Arkansas, they have heavily restricted, outlawed abortion. And yet these pills are winding up in the hands of people in Arkansas in clear violation of state law. The Attorney General there, Tim Griffin, who I've known for many years, is threatening the companies that are sending in the abortion pills. But in your opinion, is the only way around this, or the only way forward here, for the federal government to step in? Because it seems to me that's because some of these pills are coming in from overseas, I think. I mean, it appears to me to be a necessary federal intervention, don't you think?
Yes, it's not even a federal intervention. I mean, the federal government, unfortunately, is complicit in the fact that these drugs are on the market. The only reason the abortion pills are flooding states like Kentucky or pro-life states like Texas are because of the federal government permitting these abortion drugs to be on the market in the first place and sent via the postal mail system. So this is something that the federal government absolutely has 100% ability to regulate and to remove from the market. This is a quick history here. In 2000, the abortion pill, chemical abortion, was put on the market under Clinton via an illegal fast-track approval process where they circumvented the typical approval process of the FDA because there was so much pro-abortion ideology in the administration. They wanted the pill on the market. Then, under Obama, there were doctor's visits that had been required because this is a lethal drug. You need to see where the baby is inside of the mother. If it's an ectopic pregnancy, as an example, that's 2% of pregnancies. Today, the baby, when they're killed via the abortion pill, can't be removed, and so that could be life-threatening for the mother. It can kill the mother. There's all these side effects that can happen. So there used to be 3 doctor's visits required, even under Clinton. Obama removed 2 of them. Again, this was illegally done originally, and then the regulatory process has been abysmal. They took 2 doctor's appointments away. Then under President Biden, during COVID, they removed the last doctor's appointment. So now you can order lethal drugs via the mail after a quick appointment via your computer, and the drugs show up on your doorstep or in your mailbox. This entire system is illegal, It is completely antithetical to the whole purpose of the Food and Drug Administration to regulate and remove dangerous drugs off the market, but it's persisting under President Trump's administration. And there have been research done, like I said, studies of hundreds of thousands of women where they anonymize the healthcare data, but they look at the insurance records, and they find that for women who take the abortion pill today, 1 out of every 22 of them end up in the emergency room. 1 out of every 10 of them have serious adverse side effects. If any other drug, and I was just speaking with Secretary Kennedy, RFK, about this and some of his team, if any other drug was on the market causing this much havoc on the users that took them, it would be immediately pulled from the market. And if any other drug was killing people directly, like the abortion pill kills the baby, it should be immediately pulled from the market. This drug does not belong on the market, and this is 100% the prerogative of the FDA. They can pull this drug, and they must.
Lila, I have to ask you, what are you hearing from inside the Trump administration? And I'm going to give you about 30 seconds here, and we're going to be finished here for this segment. But what are you hearing? I mean, what are the chances that you're going to see action on this anytime in the near future?
It looks like there is awareness. I'm hearing awareness that they know that this is crazy, that the pill has been put onto the market politically. It's ideologically motivated. It's so dangerous. And there is a seriousness. It sounds like they want to review it. They want to do their own internal research on it. I'm concerned there's not enough urgency, and that's why we're pushing the administration to take immediate action.
All right, that voice you're hearing today, that of Lila Rose, pro-life advocate, founder and president of Live Action, and host of the Lila Rose Show podcast. She's also an author. She was at the March for Life on Friday. You can find her on the X platform at Lila Grace Rose. If you're interested in pro-life issues, she is a must-follow. Lila, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks so much for having me on. Great to chat.
Great to chat with you as well. January 26th, not only are we ready for some Kentucky windage, we're ready for some Kentucky coal. I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes extolling the virtues of coal. If you are, like I am, buried under the snow and ice right now, it's only because of fossil fuels, and a lot of it is coal, that you are able to stay warm. That is a fact. When you think about turning on the heat today, think about thanking a coal miner, because that's what you're getting right now if you're within the sound of my voice, most likely. Joining me for this segment, Michelle Bloodworth, President and CEO of America's Power, which advocates on behalf of coal-powered electricity all around the country. Michelle, welcome into the Scott Jennings Show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Scott. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I've got 10 inches of snow and a bunch of ice here in Virginia as well.
So let me ask you about Virginia. We are like 6 years into their mandated rapid shift into clean energy in Virginia. But if you are warm in Virginia, sounds like you're warm, it's largely due to coal, gas, and nuclear energy. If you look at the eastern seaboard, the only reason the electricity grid is working right now is because of coal, gas, and nuclear. A lot of it is coal. Tell us about what coal is doing to keep us warm right now, Michelle.
Yes, well, certainly the weekend's winter storm, and obviously it's not over, was a real stress test for the electricity grid. As we all saw, temperatures plunged and demand surged. PJM, which is one of the largest regional grid operators, expects to see peak winter demand this week. But coal plants really did deliver dependable electricity when Americans needed it most. And when the conditions were the toughest, coal performed exactly as it intended, 24/7 baseload electricity. And really during the last, whether that's bomb cyclone, polar vortex, now we have Vern, coal really performed and has performed and continues to perform well during extreme winter weather. And I would say many of those states that have very aggressive clean energy goals, I would say, are really regretting that they don't have those coal plants, those that have retired within their state and certainly within their region.
I was reading a story in the Wall Street Journal this morning. New York has put a blockade on gas pipelines there that have constrained the fuel supply for power plants across New England. They have had to resort to burning oil, which accounted for 40% of electricity. And get this, according to the Wall Street Journal, The New York region was generating, and New England was generating more power from burning wood and trash than from wind power. Coal and other fossil fuels, Michelle, are so much more reliable. And when the cold really hits, when the blizzard hits, it is still the best way to go all across this country, yes?
Yes, and certainly I would say the Wall Street Journal board got it right because, again, when the grid is under extreme distress, dependable, dispatchable power really matters, and coal certainly kept on the lights when the weather and also when we have fuel constraints, whether that's natural gas. Obviously, when we look at MISO coal, which is the Midwest grid operator, coal provided more generation on that peak winter day than any other resource, and so it continues to play a very important critical role. Unfortunately, what we're concerned about is this is happening while about 1/3 of the coal fleet is scheduled to retire in the next 5 years, largely due to past policy decisions. And these plants, they're not closing because they stopped working. They're closing because we had bad policies, both at a federal and a state level, pushing them out.
Let me go back to this issue of the Midwest MISO grid, MISO. The Energy Department waived emissions rules. This is the Trump administration, so that these fossil fuel plants you're talking about could run at maximum capacity. Early Sunday morning, coal accounted for 40% of power in the Midwest MISO grid and 24% in the Eastern U.S. grid. That was the PJM interconnection. 18% in Texas. Most of the rest of the generation came from natural gas and nuclear. It would be a huge mistake for us to continue to go down the road of attacking coal, but that's what some policymakers, mostly Democrats, want to do. Michelle Bloodworth from America's Power, thanks for joining us. We'll check back in with you as this winter weather continues. But the bottom line is, if you're warm and you can turn on the heat and you don't want to be sitting in 0 degrees, thank a coal miner. Thank a coal-fired power plant, because that is the only reason you're able to do it. When we come back, Josh Hammer is our special guest. We'll cover the news of the day. It's Common Sense for the American. Broadcasting live today from Louisville, Kentucky. It's cold here. It's cold in a lot of places. Goodness gracious. Hope you're staying warm wherever you are. And if you are, it's the coal miners of America keeping it that way. People underestimate this issue, this energy issue. When something like this happens, it's not going to be the windmills and the solar panels, folks. Coal, gas, nuclear. That's what you need. That's what you need to power America. Joining me this hour, Josh Hammer, host of the Josh Hammer Show on Salem. He is also senior editor-at-large of Newsweek. He is senior counsel at the Article 3 Project. We have Mike Davis of Article 3 on from time to time. He is the author of an amazing book called Israel and Civilization. Josh Hammer, welcome back to the Scott Jennings Show.
Scott, it's truly a pleasure to call you not just a friend, but also a colleague now with Salem. I really appreciate it.
Well, we're glad to have you at Salem, and I follow all your work and all your writing very closely. We're going to do a little breaking news with you this hour, Josh. Let us listen in on the White House briefing taking place just a little while ago in Washington. This is Caroline Leavitt. So here's what's going on. The president talked to Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota today. Both Trump and Walz have acknowledged this. Trump issued what appeared to me to be a rather conciliatory note about their call and their shared goals. Let's see what Caroline Leavitt had to say about it. Let's do cut 14.
In Minnesota. Number one, Governor Walz, Mayor Frey, and all Democrat leaders should turn over all criminal illegal aliens currently incarcerated in their prisons and jails to federal authorities, along with any illegal aliens with active warrants or known criminal histories for immediate deportation. Number two, state and local law enforcement must agree to turn over all illegal aliens who are arrested by local police. And then thirdly, local police must assist federal law enforcement in apprehending and detaining illegal aliens who are wanted for crimes, especially violent crimes. If Governor Walz and Mayor Frey implement these common sense cooperative measures that I will add have already been implemented in nearly every single other state across the country, Customs and Border Patrol will not be needed to support ICE on the ground in Minnesota. ICE and local law enforcement can peacefully work together, as they are effectively doing in so many other states and jurisdictions. Additionally, President Trump is calling on the United States Congress to immediately pass legislation ending sanctuary cities once and for all. American cities should be safe sanctuaries for law-abiding citizens only, not for dangerous illegal alien criminals who broke our nation's laws and do not belong here. We hope Governor Walz will do the right thing and continue to work with President Trump to keep the American people safe following their call this morning.
All right, Josh, what's your reaction to this and the news that Trump and Walz are talking?
Well, I suppose, Scott, it's better to be talking than not talking. I mean, I wouldn't take this guy's word, frankly, for very much. I mean, Tim Walz, Keith Ellison, Jacob Frey, the whole litany of Democratic leaders there in the land of 10,000 lakes. I mean, they're really riling up the people's passions with this incessant demagoguery. And, you know, the point, Scott, that I've been making on my own program, the Josh Hammer Show, for weeks and weeks now, is putting on my American history buff cap, especially as someone born on Abraham Lincoln's birthday. I'm getting some odd flashbacks to like middle school, high school history when it comes to the mid-19th century, if you catch my drift. I was listening to Keith Ellison, the Attorney General of Minnesota, a couple weeks ago, read off his complaint about this lawsuit that he was filing along with Jacob Frey, Minneapolis, and their Twin City, St. Paul, against Kristi Noem and DHS. And he was there, and he was saying that the 10th Amendment states' rights, the federal government does not belong here. That's essentially what he was saying. He literally said the 10th Amendment, states' rights, all this stuff. And I'm sitting there, Scott, thinking, my goodness gracious, if you put on like a Southern drawl there, you could be mistaken for thinking that you're listening to the ghost of John C. Calhoun and the nullification crisis that led to the Civil War. So this is really dangerous stuff, and I would caution the president against trusting these hooligans too much. But as I said, it's better to be talking certainly than not to be talking.
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen here. I mean, obviously, Trump, I'm sure, when he turns on his television, no president wants to see chaos. And I think Trump is in an interesting situation here because we're really not doing anything different in Minneapolis than we're doing in any other place, enforcing federal immigration law. Yet what you have are local Democrats who simply think they, as you pointed out, should exist in a state of secession. But at the same time, you don't want the chaos to continue to be playing out. You also don't want to be run out of town. I mean, it seems to me the worst case scenario here would be for federal agents to be run out of town because then it would be open season on federal law enforcement all over the country. This is a test case. Are we going to see through the enforcement of federal immigration law? Or are we going to be run out of town? I don't think Trump can permit that. What do you think?
Yeah, it's basically a do it or you don't situation. Scott, as a general rule in life, I'm not a big fan of half measures. If you commit to something, I'm a big proponent of actually fully committing to it. And they've committed to this. DHS fully committed to this immigration enforcement operation in Minneapolis following the national explosion of the Somali fraud scandal, the Nick Shirley video, Christopher Ruffer's amazing investigations and all that there. And that's directly what precipitated this current extant ongoing operation there in the Twin Cities. And you can't give up. At this point, look, I've had friends, Scott, who have said to me, some fellow lawyers say, look, Minnesota's a failed state. You know, let them just eat what they have prepared for themselves. I mean, let them ultimately bear the fruits of their own insidiousness and their own insurrectionary behavior. And I'm very sympathetic to that, certainly. I mean, this whole reap what you sow mentality, but I think your point is ultimately the stronger one, which is that, I mean, that's the Abraham Lincoln point, is that you can't let states, municipalities, localities get around with just nullifying federal law. 600,000 plus Americans paid the ultimate sacrifice. They literally gave their lives to establish that proposition. We ended a century of Jim Crow, praise be to God, in the 1960s to again end this notion that you can just nullify federal law. Immigration law has been part of federal law essentially since this nation's founding. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution allows Congress to prescribe a uniform rule of naturalization. This is bread and butter federal law there, and you can't let these people get away with it because you're right. If you embolden Waltz and Ellison and Fry and the Minnesota Democratic establishment, they will be emboldened New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles. I mean, imagine the field day that Zohran Mamdani would have with this if he sees this mini experiment end in Minnesota the way that I think the Minnesotans, or at least the Minnesota Democratic establishment wants it to end.
Yeah, the insurrection ultimately has to be put down. And that's my next question for you, Josh. We're talking to Josh Hammer, by the way, the Josh Hammer podcast here on Salem, among many other hats that he wears. And the difference between protesting and interfering with federal law enforcement, there's a clear line. Caroline Leavitt got asked about this today. Let's hear cut 15. Let's hear Leavitt, and then I want to hear Josh's reaction. Here's Leavitt.
Is it the White House's position that Americans have the right to show up to these ICE operations and film, document, or protest the law enforcement actions?
All Americans have a First Amendment constitutional right, of course, but Americans do not have a constitutional right to impede and obstruct lawful immigration enforcement operations. That is actually a crime, and it's something that we've seen taking place in the streets of Minneapolis, which again is leading to these dangerous circumstances that these federal law enforcement officers have been forced to work with.
It seems to me, Josh, that what's happening here is the left is trying to shift the conversation about protesting so that you believe, anybody would believe, that touching a federal law enforcement agent, getting in the middle of an arrest, blowing a whistle 2 inches from their face, hitting them with your car, et cetera, is somehow protected speech. But that is not the case. There is a difference between protesting, which is allowed under the First Amendment, and doing any of those things. And it feels like the left, in collusion with the media, is trying to move this conversation around when really, in my opinion, all they're doing is convincing a bunch of people, radicalizing a bunch of people into doing things that are putting them in harm's way, getting people injured, and now, unfortunately, 2 people killed.
Oh, yeah, Scott, they are absolutely riling up, stirring up the people's passions there. I mean, this is the worst of demagoguery. I mean, they're, you know what it is, Scott? I think that you will appreciate this. It's very similar to the Hamas playbook. Think about what happened in Gaza with Hamas controlling ever since they took over in 2007 there. They have this deeply cynical PR propaganda strategy where they will use their own people, essentially trying to put them out there as cannon fodder, as martyrs. And they know they're going to be killed, but they're trying to win the information war. They're trying to win the war of propaganda. And that's roughly analogous to what Tim Walz, Jacob Fry, Keith Ellison are more or less doing with this rhetoric that's getting people like Renee Good, getting people like Alex Petty to get out there, ultimately willing to put themselves in the middle of obstructing an active law enforcement operation there. And therefore, it really is the Democratic establishment in the state that is ultimately culpable, I think, for what we are currently seeing there. And yes, they are totally obfuscating and muddying the waters when it comes to this legal distinction between First Amendment protected speech and protest versus things like trespass. I mean, think about the church that was invaded, that was trespassed in St. Paul, Minnesota last Sunday. I mean, Don Lemon getting there, saying a First Amendment right. No, you don't. You have a First Amendment right to stand on the sidewalk outside the church and hold your dumb Soros-funded sign, whatever it is there. You can't trespass a private property there. Keith Ellison, who's the Attorney General of the state, apparently he has to go back and revisit Common Law 101 from law school. He was saying that the First Amendment protects that. No, it doesn't. It's literally a private property trespass. Similarly, Alex Petty over the weekend there, he brought a loaded firearm and started messing with federal law enforcement officials. Scott, I carry a firearm every single day. I'm a big concealed carry guy, big Second Amendment guy there. When hypothetically, I don't really go to protests, but if I were to go to a protest with federal law enforcement officers, I probably would leave my gun at home. I mean, there's a thing called the Second Amendment. There's also a thing called common sense. And there seems to be a tremendous dearth of common sense there in the land of 10,000 lakes.
Yeah, I'm protective of people exercising their Second Amendment rights. I really am. And I don't have a problem with people carrying guns as long as they're following all the laws, regulations, and so on and so forth. What I have a problem with, Josh, is whether you're carrying a gun or not. When you walk yourself or drive yourself into the middle of a law enforcement situation, so law enforcement is arresting someone, they're detaining someone, they're pursuing someone, they're in a street, they're running a checkpoint, whatever they're doing, when you put yourself in the middle of that, you are interfering with that operation. You're violating the law at that point, and that's when chaos ensues. And so, you know, whether you're carrying a gun or not, I mean, it wasn't smart for him, obviously, to engage with the law enforcement. I'm protective of the Second Amendment piece on this, but I'm with you. When it comes right down to it, a little common sense. It's really easy, by the way, to not get yourself in these situations. And you have to really try to get yourself into them. And that's what, unfortunately, some people are being instructed to do. More with Josh Hammer in just a moment. Stretch here on Monday, January 26th. Common sense for the American people. Scott Jennings is here on Salem. My special guest, fellow Salem colleague, Josh Hammer, also editor-at-large at Newsweek. Josh, it looks like Walz has put out a statement on his conversation with Trump. The president and Governor Walz spoke today. And, you know, here's the problem with Walz. He is dishonest and he is a buffoon. So when you're negotiating with someone who's a dishonest buffoon, you have a problem. Walz in his statement says that Minnesota Department of Corrections honors federal detainers. That's true. That's true. So the state prisons do honor federal detainers. But that's not the issue. The issue is that Minneapolis and also county jails do not. That's the issue. That's where ICE wants to be, in the city and county jails. That's where Jacob Fry comes in. He's not cooperating with federal law enforcement. So when I hear the president talking to Walz and I see his conciliatory note about the whole thing, then I see Walz putting out a statement which is fundamentally very misleading. It makes me think, how can you ever get to a negotiated settlement here where we're enforcing federal law and Democrats are actually being cooperative and productive? It seems to me all they want to do is lie and create narratives. Josh, how do you see it?
You know, before the break, Scott, I was drawing this analogy of the obstinate Democratic establishment in Minnesota to Hamas, insofar as not that they are literally 7th century aspiring genocidal jihadists, but they have this deeply cynical propaganda PR strategy where they are open, willing, perhaps, dare I say, even eager to increase the violence and bloodshed for the sake of scoring partisan political points against the opposition. And if you want to take this analogy a little further here, I think it's also instructive because one lesson that Israel has learned really, really much the hard way, like the very, very hard way over the past 15 years, really over the past 6-7 decades of their existence, is that when it comes to a lot of these revanchist Arab forces, and especially with jihadism, you can't negotiate your way out. There is one language to speak, and that language is power. So that's a very kind of ham-handed way of then getting us back to this situation in Minnesota there, which is, I don't think that nice words are ultimately going to rectify this situation, because you're dealing here with an opposition party, that being the Minnesota Democratic establishment, whether it's Tim Walz, Jacob Fry, Keith Ellison, Ilhan Omar, all of them. They're deeply disingenuous. They're dissembling. As you correctly note here with this response about detainers, they're too cute by half. They're not really given the full story there. And I do think that much as Israel learned when it comes to Hamas, I think that Donald Trump is going to have to respond here with power. That doesn't mean bombing Minnesota or our own cities, obviously, but it does mean an overwhelming demonstration of federal law enforcement. In my estimation, that ought to include the invocation of the Insurrection Act, this Thomas Jefferson-era 1807 statute, which, by the way, to go back to our Abraham Lincoln point, Lincoln invoked the Insurrection Act within days of the Confederate firing on Fort Sumter in South Carolina. So there's ample precedent of this, where there is insurrection in the interior. You invoke this particular statute there. You then enable active duty military to go in for domestic law enforcement purposes there. I'm not saying that'll be a panacea. I wouldn't make all of our problems go away, but I think it could potentially go a very long way. You also need to obviously defund every federal taxpayer money from these so-called sanctuary jurisdictions. There is ample legal runway to do this. There's a late 1980s Supreme Court case called South Dakota versus Dole, where they basically said that in order to have the states assist the federal government in enforcing the mandatory drinking age, which was then raised to 21 years old, you could threaten to withhold or actually withhold funding from the states when it comes to related topics there. So, for instance, the speed limits on the highways, things that have a close substantive nexus to the drinking age, you can withhold related funding. So here, what I've been saying for a long time now is that the Pam Bondi-led DOJ, the Kristi Noem-led DHS, they should be withholding every penny of related funding to states and municipalities there. Frankly, DOJ gives a lot of block grant funding to local police departments. And these funds for these so-called sanctuary jurisdictions should all be withheld, each and every one of them, every penny in my estimation, unless and until they bend the knee and agree to not merely not obstruct, but I would say to actively assist in federal law enforcement operations.
Josh Hammer is our guest. He's a new colleague on Salem. He's got a podcast here. Josh, you got about 20 seconds. Where else can we find Josh Hammer content out there?
Scott, really appreciate it, my friend. So the Josh Hammer Show, again, available every day via the Salem Podcast Network and Salem News Channel. My syndicated column every week at Newsweek and various Salem media properties, Town Hall, PJ Media, Hot Air, Article3Project.com is our legal website there. My book is Israel and Civilization, The Fate of the Jewish Nation and the Destiny of the West.
That's Josh Hammer, and I'm Scott Jennings. We're wrapping up today. More common sense for the American people tomorrow. We'll cover the breaking news and bring you insightful commentary as well. Thanks for joining us.